So this is some PhD that I stumbled across while I was looking for all this stuff. The myth of Göbekli Tepe, what the archaeological fringe isn't telling you. If you're into archaeology, Neolithic civilizations, ancient religion, and of course, Paleo Babel, you've heard of Göbekli Tepe. But in case not, Göbekli Tepe is an archaeological site in Turkey, blah, 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 blah. 94, we know that. Fringe researchers were quick to label it the original Eden. The problem is that other archaeologists who have now gone through the dig material don't believe the site is a slam dunk for a temple complex. One of them is E.B. Banning, author of So Fair a House, Göbekli Tepe, and the Identification of Temples in the Pre-Pottery Neolithic of the Near East. Oh, wow, that's sounds like a thrilling read. Current Anthropology, 52.5, blah, 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 like so many other antidotes to Paleobabble. Banning articles is not publicly available to those who lack access to scholarly journal databases like that. He outlines growing archaeological evidence for daily activities at the site, such as flint knapping and food preparation. The presence of this evidence suggests that the site was not, after all, devoid of residential occupation, but likely had quite a large population, Banning said. Banning goes on to argue that the population may have been housed in the purported temples themselves. He disagrees with the idea that the presence of decorative pillars or massive construction efforts means the building could not have been residential space. Archaeologists have proposed that quite a number of structures dating to the pre-pottery Neolithic A and B in Southwest Asia were non-domestic ritual buildings, sometimes described specifically as temples or shrines. And these figure large in some interpretations of social change in the Near Eastern Neolithic. Yet the evidence supporting the identification of cult buildings is often equivocal or depends on ethnocentric distinctions between sacred and profane spaces. This paper explores the case of Göbekli Tepe, a large pre-pottery Neolithic site in Turkey that its excavator claims consisted only of temples, to illustrate weaknesses in some kind of claims about Neolithic sacred spaces and to explore some of the problems of identifying prehistoric ritual. Consideration of the evidence suggests the alternative hypothesis that the buildings at Göbekli Tepe may actually be houses, albeit ones that are rich in symbolic content. So this guy's arguing that it's not a temple at all, that this was a housing place for many, many people, which I think makes way more sense in my humble opinion.
I don't think it's a housing complex because it doesn't look like there's the space and the necessary building structures. But again, we're what, 5% dug up so far?
Something like that. We're not even close to getting all the way through it.
Like those structures look like it's tracking something or leaving some sort of physical record for other people to reference.
Mm-hmm.
Like obviously there has to be a housing complex because that took, with as much as they're saying is there has to be more, even if it's not as stone. Like there has to be housing, there has to be food, there has to be workshops.
Well, they said it was a thing and being used for 1,000 years.
Yeah, like there's more there for
100%.
sure.
100%. 100%. A couple things on the skulls, and then this one here is just kind of running through a few of the different ideas that have been. This is really brief. There have been a number of interesting archaeological discoveries at Göbekli Tepe, which is a hill that is in southeastern Turkey. Several standing stones were buried on the hill, many of them at the top, blah, 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 blah. So was it aliens that buried the stones? Because of the ancient timing of the burial of the upright stones at Göbekli Tepe, there is some speculation that aliens were responsible for them, because there are shapes of scorpions and spiders on some of them. The theory is that aliens quarried the stones, carved them, and then left them as a message to indicate that they were here. We were here. That's all it was. This hoax is easily debunked. No intelligent life from another world has been discovered. This does not necessarily mean it does not exist, but there is no direct evidence that Göbekli Tepe is extraterrestrial. Those who see aliens in these archaeological discoveries are likely seeking validation for their own personal beliefs. A little bit pointed there, sir. Was it the burial place of biblical figures? There is some speculation that the site of Göbekli Tepe might actually be a treasured religious site from the Old Testament. Figures like Abraham or Jacob may have been buried on the hill, since they were revered figures of their time, and that this would have turned the location into a place of worship. This would be especially true if there were Judaic populations that inherited the area so long ago. Because of the many bone fragments that have been found around the buried stones, on the surface, this seems like a legitimate explanation. So it was your people.
I'm running through my head because I don't remember the old Jews going that far north. There were a couple other empires that they were competing with, but I don't remember them going that far north, but I could be wrong. Like mostly it was around the Red Sea and along Israel today, some of Jordan. I know it poked into now Syria, but I don't think it ever went that far north.
I've been at a church in Iraq that they said Jesus Christ had walked in. It was all fenced off and you couldn't like go in it or anything, but like we walked around the outside of this building and it was pretty crazy looking.
Yeah, I wanted to do a topic on that because there's a lot of crazy stuff for biblical stuff.
It was a pretty wild church. This hoax is not as easily debunked. It is possible that the Jewish people journeyed down to southern Turkey at some point during their history. Even in the Old Testament, they were at war with the surrounding cultures for quite some time. To have the ancient figures buried so far from their promised land, however, does not seem to make much sense. The truth is that no one knows anything about Göbekli Tepe. The problem with Göbekli Tepe is that there is no evidence of culture that surrounds the area. There are no homes, no water supplies, and no domestic plant remains. If it was a religious or holy site, then it would have been for the hunters who were scouring the region for food or a pilgrimage location for those who practiced that particular religion. It is the hoax of Göbekli Tepe that calls it the foundation of modern religion or the evidence of alien presence on this planet that can be quickly debunked. This is pure speculation without evidence, and from a scientific perspective, those are only theories instead of facts. Told you it was short.
I think I did find something related to your article, though. I do want to pull it up real quick.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens.
Oh, that dude's great. That dude's great. Skull cult at Göbekli Tepe. One of the significant desert spots discovered further discoveries. I don't want to reread all of that. This year, researchers revealed that microscopic analysis of bone fragments found at the site suggests that human skulls may once have hung there on prominent display. The fragments belong to 3 partially preserved skulls that were carved and altered after death. This is the first indication of how Göbekli Tepe's inhabitants may have treated their dead, and archaeologists believe it may provide evidence of an early Neolithic skull cult that exhibit the decapitated heads of either venerated ancestors or dispatched enemies at designated spots. The discovery further underscores the complex ritual behavior exhibited at Göbekli Tepe. Marks on the 3 partial skulls indicate that they were defleshed, modified, and even painted. Deep incisions were repeatedly carved into the skulls with stone tools to create grooves that ran up the forehead and toward the back of the head. According to research, Julia Greski, one of the German Archaeological Institute, the skulls may have been suspended by a cord that wrapped around the head and passed through a small drill hole at the top. The incised grooves would have prevented the cord from slipping along the smooth surface of the bone as it dangled. The 3 modified skulls attest to the special treatment of certain individuals and represent an entirely new category of find, she says, one which testifies to the interaction of the living with the dead at this important early Neolithic ritual center.
Hold on. I heard all that, and the first thing that came to mind was alien ripping out the skulls and spine.
Predator?
Or a predator, yeah.
Predator. That's what it sounded like to me when I first heard about the grooves and stuff. That's exactly what it sounded like to me. It sounded like a spot for a rope to sit without sliding back and forth.
Yeah.
So that skull cult is based off of this finding, obviously. At a 12,000-year-old temple in Southeast Asia, blah, blah, blah. Researchers discovered tens of thousands of animal bones at the site. The site's stone artwork includes depictions. A detailed study of 3 of these skull fragments found that their flesh had been removed in grooves carved from front to back. One fragment also had a hole drilled in it. The carvings consist, blah, blah, blah. Same thing, right? This is the beginning of that. And this is the last thing I got on the matter. This is the original discovery. This is carved human skulls found in an ancient stone temple. So I say we watch this little video.
Researchers
And it's
have
less than
discovered
2 minutes
evidence
long.
of a Neolithic skull cult at an important archaeological site in southeastern Turkey. They found skull fragments with unique markings buried among the earliest known examples of monumental buildings, sometimes called the world's first temples. Since there were markings on...
So they found them off of 3 individual skulls, and these are the parts they have, right? So they're basing this entire skull cult theory off of 3 skulls. Right. I don't necessarily buy the skull cult thing, but it is interesting because it does seem that they had these on display or dangling somewhere. They were hung up on ropes, is my guess.
Yeah. That's not a lot of information to go off of.
It's sure not, especially when you consider they've got hundreds of thousands of bone fragments and they're basing it off of 3 skulls.
fragments from 3 different skulls, and they were found in the context of the Göbekli Tepe site, for which a clear ritual component is proposed. Researchers believe that these fragments could be evidence of the presence of a skull cult. A skull cult means people were modifying...
But you can see all the different tool markings. They obviously put a lot of effort into getting this groove in there.
I'm not... Let me see. I'm going to go pasty white here for a second. It almost kind of looks like they just kept running rope over it. Like there's not... Like they buried this, so it's decently preserved. It doesn't look like a normal tool mark.
Well, it looks like a very fine tip.
Yeah.
If you ask me. Or, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if that means metal or if that means flint or whatever, but...
I mean, bone's relatively soft, too.
The human skull is pretty hard, though. As far as bones go, it's a hard one.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard one, but bone is really easy. I mean, relatively easy to put marks and chips and any sort of mark into.
For sure.
Decorating and displaying skulls in a ritual context. Other decorated skulls have been found at other Neolithic sites in the Middle East, but this is the first such find at Göbekli Tepe. Here, the bodies were buried, the skulls occasionally exhumed and stripped of any remaining flesh. Subsequently, skulls could be decorated with paint or facial features remodeled in clay.
This I find very interesting.
Interesting or disturbing?
Well, both, but they were rebuilding the faces out of clay onto the skulls.
Yeah.
And this is from Jericho. This isn't from Gobekli Tepe, just to clarify. This is from Jericho in the same area.
Analysis of the new fragments revealed cut marks in the skulls left over from the defleshing process, as well as deep grooves made with flint tools and puncture holes. These incisions and holes are a type of skull modification that hasn't been seen before in
He said flint. He said flint tools.
this region. It suggests that the skulls were strung up as decoration. It's too soon to tell whether these skulls were marked as a way to honor ancestors or punish fallen enemies. Researchers will be back this fall to look for more clues to the rituals, more skulls, and the missing skeletons.
It's interesting.
It is pretty interesting.
Like, I mean, I guess it makes sense if you're. Yeah, It's not the only ancient society that hung skulls.
No,
Like,
not
a
at
lot
all.
of them.
Pretty wild, though. It's absolutely pretty wild.
Definitely wild.
That's pretty crazy. And ladies and gentlemen, that's all I've got for you.